Hello everybody and welcome to the Creative Insider number 69 with me, Georgi. In today's episode, we're going back to do something special. We did a podcast together with Désirée where we were trying to break down the principles of leadership exposed by Jocko Willink, the former Navy SEAL, in his books, in particular Extreme Ownership, Dichotomy of Leadership, and the Leadership Strategy and Tactics Field Manual. Like a companion to this podcast, you will find also a written form article on our website, thecreativeinsider.com. So if you want to read more about the principles we were trying to break down in this podcast, go on our website and check the article I wrote. And this is sort of a special podcast with which we want to help you, but we also would like to have at some point Jocko on the podcast if it's possible. So if you like the podcast, go on our social media and reshare the post of this podcast by tagging Jocko Willink, or just reshare the podcast on your social media, Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, whatever you like, and tag him so that he gets some awareness of the situation and that we have talked about him, and that eventually he will be participating on our podcast if you are numerous enough. And last but not least, before we start, you can also support our podcast by subscribing to our Patreon, where with $5 a month you'll be able to know in advance our guest and submit some questions that we will eventually ask our guests. And also you can support us by sharing about our podcast with your friends, by subscribing to your favorite podcasting platform. Now you can subscribe on YouTube, on the Creative Insider channel, where we are slowly adding all the podcasts in audiogram form and soon in video form. And subscribe also to follow us on our social media channels, which are Instagram at TS Podcast, and also on LinkedIn, the Creative Insider. So thank you very much and enjoy this podcast.
The whole world stops just like that.
Hello, Désirée. How are you?
Hey, I'm good. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. Welcome back to the podcast. We haven't done a podcast together in a while.
Yes, thank you for having me again.
I don't even remember when was the last time that we did a podcast together, because it was we have had a very long streak of people on the show, and it's interesting.
Last summer, I think. Was that the first wave or second wave?
I don't know. I'm trying to check our Instagram account to see how many podcasts we have been doing with guests, but it's been several months, and the last one we did together was the 41, which is 30 episodes ago.
Oh, right.
I think
end of last year, wasn't it?
No, it was the beginning of this year.
Ah, okay.
When we did the one about the 30 days digital declutter.
Yeah.
And then we have had a lot of guests, a lot of interesting guests. And I've been procrastinating on this podcast for a very long time because it's been in my mind for a long time. But we have had a 1-week holiday, where I had a little bit of time to think it through, how to do the podcast, to reread some books, just to work on it. And finally we're here. So today we're going to be talking about leadership. And in specific, we're going to be talking about one of my, so to say, idols or figures that I like to follow in my life. Not at the level I wish sometimes, but the important is to try. And that's Jocko Willink. We've mentioned Jocko a couple of times on the podcast. I've mentioned his books. And I've been following Jocko since now, I don't know, probably 6 or 7 years. I remember the first video I saw of him was through Business Insider, which is ironic because we're Creative Insider, where he was explaining his routine at waking up at 4:30 in the morning. So if people go on Jocko Willink Instagram, you can see that basically his feed is a picture of his watch and his gorilla arm, as Joe Rogan call it. very hairy gorilla arm because he works out a lot, and it says 4:30 every day. And there are very, very few exceptions where he doesn't wake up at 4:30, and he usually announces it. He says like, "Okay, guys, I went to bed at 2, so please do accept that I'm not gonna wake up at 4:30."
So he lets his fans be accountable, make him accountable, so to say.
I don't think he needs anyone to make him accountable, because what he says is that. So let's say why for me it's important to talk about him, about leadership through his eyes, and why I think he is a person that people should listen to. Generally, like creative people like me, we tend to be a little bit snobby and a little bit feeling ourselves, considering ourselves very special, because when we study, when we learn our craft, we need to do very long shifts. We often work through multiple times after each other. We don't sleep. The tasks are sometimes unclear. The teachers are hardcore. Then you move to the real world, the professional world, and also you have deadlines that are very strict, very tight. Clients that are complicated. So people tend, from any creative industry, I think, not only architecture, but also graphic design, web design, everything that involves design, they tend to, consider themselves more than the others. And I don't know, if you think about other fields like lawyers or accountants.
Well, yeah, I guess any field that requires you to have a certain confidence to stand by your idea.
Yeah, but it's
your creative output.
Yeah, not only, but it's more about how you reach this output, because you have to put a lot of work. So if meanwhile you're a lawyer, yeah, you might have long hours, but it's you don't create, you just study a law. Maybe you're creative in a way you interpret the law and you defend your...
But it's a different type of creativity.
Yes. And so creatives tend to be very, very snobby about this thing, that they're super special. And they tend to not listen to people from different fields because they consider themselves superior. But what for me was very special when I found out about Jocko was that he's a military guy. So he is a former Navy SEAL. He was the commander of Task Unit Bruiser and the Iraqi war, and he was participating in the Battle of Ramadi, which was one of the toughest battles in the war in Iraq, and they had casualties every day. And he was, the Navy SEALs, for the people who don't know, are the most elite, so to say, military force of the United States. And to get itself into the SEALs, it's a very big, it's very hard, and you have to go through BATS, which is these trainings that we usually see in the military movies, where people are just running with boats, standing in those cold water,
Going through swamps, climbing stuff.
Yes, which basically Jocko says is the easiest part of the job. And then you're not Navy SEAL. After that, you have to go through then real tactical training, and which he was training Navy SEALs after his deployment, teaching them leadership, tactics, and so on. And and in his case, for me, it was very remarkable because he talks about these things, and when he talks about difficulties, I think his kind of difficulties were the next level, because what you had on stake was your life. Like your life, you were risking your life. He was in charge of his battalion, of his task unit, Bruiser, and his decisions lives were depending on, and he lost several brothers, as he liked to say, and that's why I wanted to say that he doesn't need to be kept accountable by anyone, because he says, I have to take any opportunity I have in my life, because my former brothers, they can't, because they're passed away in a next life, and he's like, it's like he's feeling it. I if I could talk to him, I'll ask him, like, how do you come back from such an environment, especially now that we're seeing like also Afghanistan and stuff like that. And I'm thinking if this experience changed you as a personality very strongly, because you see atrocities and you see evil that you don't experience in the daily life. And so I would be curious to ask him if he ever decides to be our guest. I will ask him if he considers himself a different person before he went to actual war and after he came back. And but what is also interesting is that after his deployment, he came back and he went back to the US. We're not in the US. He went back. He was instructor of the West Coast SEALs in San Diego, where he's still living, and then he was a retired Navy SEAL, so he was getting money from the military, and some friend of him asked him if he can go at his company and teach some leadership principles he learned from the military, and Jocko agreed. And that was a very successful event, apparently. I don't know what kind of entrepreneur was this friend of him and so on. But the voice is spread around, and he was asked by other entrepreneurs to do the same at their company. And then he started a consulting company called Echelon Front, which is a company that he founded together with his brother-in-arms, Leif Babin, and they just consult companies about leadership, and they hire a lot of veterans. So I think they hire exclusively veterans in this company, and they teach leadership. And through his interviews at the Business Insider, I think he was everywhere. He was on CNN, he was on Fox News. He was, and then he went to the I think the first podcast that he did in long form, where he became very popular, was the Tim Ferriss show. We'll be putting a link in the description of the podcast so people can go and listen to that podcast with Jocko too. And then he was on the Joe Rogan Experience. And they're like, both of them, at the end of the interview, they were so impressed by his stories that they told him, you should start your own podcast. And he was like, okay, if you two guys tell me to, I will do. And then he started it now almost 3 years ago, I think, or 4. He's around episode 300, and it's called the Jocko Podcast. Some of the episodes he does are very tough because he has other veterans. He talks a lot about war. Of course, he talks a lot about leadership, but he uses war as main example and guiding topic. So sometimes it's, you have to listen to very cruel stories, and not every episode. It's, I don't know if everyone can enjoy it, but very good. Where he has done in the beginning a lot of Q&A episodes, where he would gather questions from his audience and then answer them, and was really, really great. And what is also very, very interesting about him is that he has a degree in English, because in order to become I don't know what is his title, lieutenant or something like that, he needed to have a college degree. So he decided that through the ranks of SEALs, his most important skill that he needs to develop is communicate with people. So he'll need to write a lot of protocols. He'll need to write a lot of reports and so on. So he went for a major in English at the University of San Diego, and that was for sure a skill that he used also after his career, because he's now an author, and he has published many books that became bestsellers. The first one is called Extreme Ownership. The second one is called Dichotomy of Leadership. I've never bought those in physical form, but I have listened to them on Audible, on Amazon Audible, and was really cool because the book is read by him, and his voice is very, very remarkable, and also by Leif Babin. So they have both very deep, tough voices, which add a little bit of experience to the whole literature they have created. He has done, although it sounds funny, he has done a lot of kids books. He has a series of books called Mikey and the Dragon, and they're called Mikey and the Dragon because he's one of the soldiers that were under his command was Mikey Mansour. It's a guy that was a SEAL, and he jumped on a grenade to save his other two soldiers, and he won, of course, the Medal of Honor because he lost his life. And he dedicated his book, the title and the main character, it's dedicated to Mikey Mansour, which is a guy that he lost in Ramadi in Iraq. And the first two books are in a very interesting form. He takes a principle of leadership, and he explained the principle. Then he gives a story from his military career, and then a story of the business world that he consults. So it's interesting. But after he released the first book, he explained all this principle, but a lot of questions were coming from the readers, and so he needed to write a second book, which is the Dichotomy of Leadership, where he needed to clarify the different principles that he has explained. And I think these books are very interesting and very important because they created the book that we're going to discuss in this podcast in particular, which is called Leadership Strategy and Tactics Field Manual. So it's like I think the book, the way it's written, is inspired by military manuals, because in the military world, they have a lot of manuals, like sort of like what to do in case of this, what to do in case of this, how to act when this happens, and so on. So he has written this book, which is sort of a companion for the daily life of everyone, basically. What you read the book too, right?
Yes.
So what was your impression of the book when you read it the first time, and then when you freshened it up recently?
Well, I think first, I'm not a big fan of the whole military setting because obviously it's extremely far away from me. I do know that going back to World War I and II and Patton, and that strategy has its roots in military. So I I don't know, I was skeptical if it would be too military oriented, but I actually think that the points he touches on are very much rooted in our day-to-day business world as well. And I thought it was actually, I mean, he does bring military examples, but the way he formulates the principles and the tips and the lessons and the whole execution and exercise is very relatable to teamwork today.
Yes, and I think that this book in particular, it's my favorite one because it's really a companion. It's like a book that you can read maybe cover to cover once and then keep it on your desk and consult it every day when you have a doubt about how to act in a certain situation, because he covers, I would say, 90% of the situations of daily interaction with other human beings. Because although it's about leadership, people might think it's about, if you're a leader, but everybody, also what Jocko says is that everybody a leader of something. You might be a leader of just your own life. You're a leader on your own life because you take decisions for yourself, for your family, for your dear ones. So you're in charge of something in your life. So yes, you have anyone have some situations in life which they lead. And
yeah, but I also think that we that nowadays, I mean, if we go back to the creative context or the business context or something, there's a lot of people that say of themselves they are leaders, but we have to really differentiate between being a leader and being a manager, and those are two different things. And what I loved about the points that he makes are that basically leadership has to do with building relationships and building trust. And I completely agree with that. And I think those are two of the core things that you can take out of this book. What I also especially love is that he doesn't only talk about leadership like after a 40-year career or something. He actually, and this is probably interesting for a lot of people getting into leadership positions for the first time, he describes, okay, what do you do when you're on that track to having the responsibility of making decisions for a team, for a direction, and how do you get into that mindset of becoming a leader and not managing people, but really providing a direction, providing safety, providing a trusted space, providing a motivational space to grow for your tribe, basically. And I really like that about the book. There's a big chunk of it that says, okay, how do you go about it when you're transitioning there?
yes, well, I think what I liked about it is also the whole opening, and like there are many concepts, many strategies, many tactics, many really hand-on, like what he says is that in the first two books, Extreme Ownership and Dichotomy of Leadership, he explained a principle. In this book, he goes not only on the principles, but also on practical application of these principles. And what is really cool is that he really introduces you to the topic and then develops it. And he starts with really asking the question, what is leadership? What is the goal of leadership? And the answer is that the leadership is to bring a team together, people together, even if you want your family together, on working on a mission, which mission is taken from the military world, but it's a project or a goal or something that you want to achieve together, and to get everybody do their job towards the direction. And I think a lot of people have this misconception of leadership that you have your higher rank, and through your higher rank, you impose your will to the subordinates. But this is not how it works. And also, also on personal level, like I've worked jobs that you might have some more like self-imposing boss. And just because he's my boss, I wouldn't be like, oh, I'm now going to do whatever he says because he's my boss. Like, you have to make people convinced of the goal, and you have to give them.
Yeah, you have to make them want to follow you, basically. But I think we've all had our share of good leaders, bad leaders, leaders that weren't leaders but managers, or little dictators or decision makers. I think there's really a various, let's call it, leadership type environment out there. But I personally think having bad examples is always good, because then you learn from, okay, how did I feel under this person? And how do I not want to do it with my own people or my own group later? Or the people that, I don't know, I don't like calling it your own people or my own people. It's more like the people that you're responsible for.
Yes. And the concept that I explain in the book are various, but I would say we can cover the main one so that people have this initial tool set of which, I mean, we're not revealing anything new from the book. It's if you follow Jocko or if you listen to his podcast, he'll probably, if you listen, I don't know, up to 4 episodes of his podcast, he'll explain this concept in each of them so that you can really get them. So he has done like a sort of a starter pack for every leader. And he said, like, he starts with, I interpret it like that. He starts, okay, first to be a leader of other people, you have to be a leader of yourself. So you have to get ownership of who you are and work on yourself, and first impose some leadership on your own self. So the first thing that he mentions in his book is that a leader needs to be detached emotionally. That means that no matter what happens around you, you can keep your blood cold and take whatever without too much of an emotion.
Which is really hard nowadays, because we work in very emotionally fused environments. Emotional through maybe, like you mentioned earlier, a tight deadline, which stresses you, which immediately, makes you a little more edgy, or emotional attachment to your creative product. So I think that's the hardest one to really internalize, to be honest, to that detached thing. And if you look at the videos, I mean, it's actually, I don't know, he has this really deep voice, and then he has these few, I'm going to call them inspirational videos on YouTube, where he just does a rhetoric play on the whole detach. And you hear them and you're like, okay, it's too much. But I mean, he's right, but it's hard to internalize. I found out that it's really hard to, in like really high emotional situations, it's really hard to stay detached.
So I think one of his most famous motivational video, you can say it's good.
Yes.
But the thing is that they took this video out of I don't know maybe the 5th podcast he did or something. And his producer, Echo Charles, he also participated in almost every podcast. He's really good at editing everything with sound effects, special effects. And he creates, if you listen to the raw way he saw that part about good, it's way different than after the edit of Echo Charles. So yeah. But when I think about it, it's like, you said that we react a lot of work, and you learn even from bad leaders because you learn what you don't know. What I think is good about reading a book, Jocko book or any other leadership book, is that books make you more aware of what you're experiencing, and
and show you new facets of different experiences too. Yeah.
Yes, but in this case, I think this book make you more conscious of what you experience and why you feel the way you feel in certain situations. And as somebody that's been mostly subordinate, I've noticed that my best bosses, my best leaders, my best at work, my best leaders, I would say, or managers, if you want to call them, is like sometimes when you're inexperienced, especially when you're new in the business, when problem occurs, like, let's say you did something wrong and you send it to the client complains about something, even if you want at school, if you mess up and the professor is mad at you or something, you get in this first reaction, which is a little bit of fear, panic. You're like, oh my God, how are we going to solve this? And then the best situations is where my boss came and I was like, oh, don't worry. No problem. Like, happens. Shit happens. What he wants, like what the client wants. What can we do about it? How can we solve it? And he's like, your boss gives you from, like, because you're also scared in the first moment that your boss is going to be mad at you. And like, anytime that a boss of mine came and he was actually mad at me about something that went wrong, and he put extra fire or extra fuel on the fire, never went good, because then you keep staying like undetached.
Yeah, I mean, it's the boss's responsibility to, especially with team members that are starting out, or even if it's senior team members, it's their job to help you grow and to help and to walk you through mistakes or to help you find the way through. And yeah.
Yes, but it doesn't happen always.
No, of course not. I think.
Do you have somebody that has been a leader, or somebody that you know that's, I don't know, through his detachment, or you notice he's detached and that brought you some extra calmness or extra, I don't know, confidence?
I think I was very fortunate right at the beginning of my career to have an extremely good leader character in my life, and I had an extremely good mentor that was also a very, very strong leader. And I think that really...
And were they detached emotionally?
Yes. And I think it came with them also, obviously, from experience, because from years and years of just seeing the same stuff happen all over and over again, just in different facets. But they had a very good way. It's back to that building relationships. They had a very good way of communicating with me, of understanding where I was personally and why I was handling something more difficultly than needed be. And yeah, but I think not everybody is fortunate, I think, to start off with such strong leadership in their careers. But yeah, I think, right at the beginning.
And do you know what, in my opinion, makes a leader a bad leader usually?
Go for it.
Ego, which is the second point that Jocko touches in his book, which is like putting your ego in check.
That's so common these days, though. It's really hard not to get caught up in that. It's so frustrating. It can be so frustrating.
Yeah, because if you think about it, what I say is, if your boss comes and you say, hey, boss, like, we messed up here, or I messed up here, I did this, it's wrong, now the client is mad, and the boss starts screaming at you and be like, yeah, why did you do this? This is total shit. We're not supposed to do any of these mistakes, and this is a disaster, and what the fuck? Like, there are bosses like that. It's because of their own ego. They have this, I think they have the fear of show, if you want, imperfection, or they feel that what you do is you just represent them. So
it's validation. I think it also comes.
So
from
you ruin
validation.
their own sort of prestige. And I think this is the wrongest thing. And I think this is a very hard something that defines a lot of creatives, because, as you said, also creatives need to stand for what they do. And I've said that also in other podcasts, that the fruit of your work is something very sort of personal, because it comes from your soul, from your mind. It's the fruit of...
Makes detaching even harder. It's a very hard lesson.
I think I'm pretty good at detaching, because I've learned through years like that. Like, I think that also more you go into your life, the biggest the shit happens to you, and you deal with it, and then you're like, next time it happens something, you're like, whatever, like I'm gonna deal with this too. But ego is something that also I need to personally work, because also like sometimes I have like problems in getting feedback, like somebody says, oh, this is what you do, you should do it like this. That happens a lot of also in our daily life, on personal relationship. When you come to me, it's like, could you do this like that? First reaction inside me is like, fuck, I don't want to do it like this. I can do it the way I do it already. And then, you
have to turn off that automatic reaction in the first moment. Yeah.
Yeah. And then, first reaction maybe it's like this. And then if you're a little wise, and after a few minutes, you're like, oh my God, yeah, she's right or he's right. And then you put your ego in check, and then you're like, okay, I can do better. Or sometimes the ego is like saying sorry, like, like when you go to somebody. But
where else I think ego is very detrimental? It's when not only in your own team, because there are a lot of people that are good at protecting their own team, but when it's within, for example, a big company, or even if it's a smaller company, when it's one team against another team, and it's one team leader's ego versus the other team leader's ego. And that's where I feel also it just takes on a completely new scale when it's one team against another team, but you're actually in the same boat, basically. That just makes it for everybody super difficult to move forward, and to even, when ego is involved, you're not working to the best solution anymore to the problem, but you're working to what feeds into somebody's ego or plan or roadmap. And that's where it becomes confusing and tricky and messy.
Yes, I think that happens also within the same team sometimes, team members are like starting, and that you spend a lot of your energies fighting against each other internally, instead of working on the project or on the common goal or on the common mission, which is actually what Jocko says about putting your ego in check. Means no matter what you do, you have to do the best for the good outcome of the mission.
Yeah, and that's what it should be. It's not, we learn to put it in the simplest form. It's not who's right or who has the loudest voice, who's going to box themselves through with their idea. It's more
about what is right, because like if you take the what is right instead of what you said because you said it, because this is why I say like in his case and the case of military, like the wrong decision can lead to death of dear ones and brothers, like he calls them. And this is what I say, like in our daily life, our decisions don't make to death, that they don't lead to death, but they can lead to lost projects, to missed deadline, to lost money and whatever, because of ego. And then I also hate this thing like involving politics into fighting, like
that's putting fuel on the fire.
Like who has the right to decide what. This is why I work mainly better in organization that have quite a flat hierarchy, like where you have one.
But even in flat hierarchies you have that. But that's a different topic altogether.
But I don't know. I think that if you you say fish stink from the head. So if you had a good leader, usually also bad team puts yourself put the whole team in check. Because for example, one mindset that a leader has to have, it's extreme ownership, which is the title of the first book of Jocko, which means extreme ownership means that whatever it happens, the leader take responsibility for it instead of blaming the others for that problem. So for example, let's say, let's make the example of which I did in the beginning. You did something, you send it to the client, but it was the wrong mail, was the wrong drawing, was the wrong design. You weren't supposed to send it yet. You did a mistake. Your leader comes, and if your leader start blaming you, you start defending yourself. But what a good leader should do is take ownership. Be like, my bad. I didn't tell you how to, I don't know, for example, my bad, I'm sorry, it's my fault, I didn't explain enough how you should communicate with a client, how you should send this email, what is our quality required for a work from our company that's going out of the office, or if you're a professor, my fault, I didn't explain enough what I was wanting.
I think it's really about asking yourself, what you're saying is asking yourself, why did this mistake happen, and what could I have done to help that person not make that mistake? And that can be missing information, that could be, I don't know.
But it's really taking the ownership for it, like being like,
yes, but that starts with that question. It starts with that question saying, okay, where did this go wrong? And why did it go wrong? And then to take ownership for that. And those are two very vital words you said, take responsibility. It's like, yes, that's part of the job there.
For example, after I read this concept of extreme ownership, I realized a very interesting thing about something that I didn't know before, that one of the greatest leaders and leadership lessons that I have gotten through my upbringing came from my mother. Because my mother, usually she would be like, I don't know, if I did something wrong, it didn't happen so often, but sometimes it happened. She would be like, oh my God, this is such a disappointment, but probably it's my fault. Probably I didn't explain you enough how you should behave and how you should do it, and it's my fault. And the moment she said it's her fault, I was feeling extremely guilty, because it wasn't her fault, it was my fault. So I would start acting more in the right direction, because I hated the fact that I did something wrong and my mom was blaming herself. So although it's something so stupid as a kid, but you say like, and if your parent come and start blaming you, like, why did you do that? Why didn't you do the way I told you? You'll start fighting back. But if your parent comes and tells you, this is my fault, it's my fault, I'm very disappointed on myself because I didn't explain you what is the right thing, what is the right value. And I think it's the same in a team. If your boss always takes responsibility, or at least takes responsibility enough, all the other members start doing the same thing, because they don't want to be like, oh yeah, it's like his fault. Like, very few people would act like that. What do you think about it?
I know what you mean, but I think it's important to differentiate about taking the ownership where necessary and the responsibility overall, and giving each team member or the child or whatever a certain amount of responsibility as well, because that can really backfire. I've seen leaders always take on the entire responsibility, and saying something it's my fault is sometimes very difficult to use that word, especially if we're talking in a creative or business or any type of context, because depending on who you have on the other side, that team member may then think, oh, okay, well then I can do whatever, and that person's going to, clean it up every time. So I think it's a balance act, really, to give the team that safety net that you are there, but to also give the team enough responsibility themselves that they can grow from mistakes as well. It's a balance act. I think you have to really get a feel for that.
No, what you say totally makes sense. And now that you said it, it seems like, okay, Jocko said extreme ownership, this is total bullshit. But no, it's not, because he wrote Dichotomy of Leadership, which is exactly what he explained. Due to the fact that he wrote in the first book, you should take extreme ownership. Some of the people who read that book, they said, okay, but if I take always, like exactly what you said right now, and then came up with the second book, Dichotomy of Leadership, which was like exactly this. The dichotomy is like the two faces of the same coin, If you take always ownership, like for example, this is like the helicopter parents, like if you take away from your kid the responsibility of his faults, that kid will never learn. And the same is like, I don't know, for example, in the work world, it's sometimes, the boss sees that juniors cannot deliver and juniors leave the office, and then the boss stays extra hours to fix the situation because of course the mission is the most important thing.
But that's not setting the right example. And one thing he also touches on in the book is what he calls the Decentralized Command, which basically means that you are not the person that takes all the decisions and takes all the responsibility. You have to really give it to other team members as well, so that if for some reason you're not there, the whole operation doesn't stall or go down the drain, that there can still be actions taken. And those two go hand in hand, in my opinion, because it describes that balance act. On the one hand, yes, you have to take ownership and you have to be aware of that responsibility that you carry overall. On the other hand, you have to be aware that maybe you don't have to take the decision, if we go back into the creative context, if that line is supposed to be red or blue. Maybe that's a detail that you really do not have to be dependent on to make that decision.
Yeah, but the thing I meant, it was more like, I don't know, if your employee didn't understood something, a task for the first time, and he messed up.
Yeah.
Walk
him through it. Yeah.
Yeah, you can take ownership and solve the mess, and then you do it maybe twice, and then the third time maybe you've done everything to explain your employee what he should do or she should do, and she didn't do it, and then you're like, okay, like this is what you need to correct, and now it's 6:00 in the evening. We need this by tomorrow at 8. Deal with it, suck it up, and stay longer.
In my opinion, it has to be the other way around. You have to first give your team member the direction to correct it him or herself, and I think it should start with that first, because that's giving that team member also the respect and the validation that they have the responsibility to tackle that, and they are learning through it because you're giving them pointers.
But sometimes, people like don't get it from the first time or the second time.
Yeah, but you have to give them that option from the beginning, I feel.
Yes, I believe so too. But what you said, it's also true. Like, it's one of the Decentralized Command is one of the 4 laws of combat. So he basically says, okay, once you have worked on yourself, once you have detached emotionally, once you have put your ego in check, once you have learned to take extreme ownership, but to be balanced, which means in everything. So also detached, like he says, if you're too detached emotionally, sometimes the troops or the team leaders will think you don't care at all about them, and then you cannot be always completely detached. Sometimes you have to understand their situation. Sometimes you have to be more emotional, and sometimes you have to have fun with your team. Sometimes you have to be balanced.
Yeah, sometimes you have to be angry with your team too. If everybody's angry, sometimes it's okay. In my experience, like at the beginning, the first few roles where I had more responsibility of a team, I always thought, okay, I have to be the rock in the stone. I have to be the strength for everybody through all the shit phases as well. And I quickly realized that they perceive it then as being cold or unfeeling or not feeling them enough, where I was just thinking I have to be strong for everybody. And that's not the right way to go. You have to show that balance, and you have to just start. Sometimes it makes sense to just, be pissed off with the others, but then not dwell on that, detach from that emotionally, like you just said, and then say, okay, we were pissed off now, we were angry, how are we going to move forward? Let's deal with it in this and this and this way.
So yeah, I think it's true. And what he says, it's the rule of thumb is that you intervene in the minimal amount of occasions for crucial things. So you don't get angry about every single stupid thing they do. You get angry when something really crucial to the failure of the mission they do a mistake that's critical, that you have already explained, and then you get angry and you sometimes need to scream but you need to be very, very, it's like putting your hands in a mechanism. You don't do it constantly. You just touch the little buttons when needed, because what also he mentions in his books is this leadership capital, because if you put yourself too much in between of people, they will be like starting being annoying at you. So you need to you have to build this credibility of the leader through your actions, and then use it in very single situation where it's really, really crucial and needed. So I think to understand this concept, people should really read maybe all of his books or listen to a lot of his podcasts to understand what he exactly means. But it's really like, like intervening into a situation with the minimal leadership capital. Like, I don't know, your team started working and did a very critical mistake in the beginning, and then you have to explain why this is a critical mistake and get angry and explain that you have told them multiple times and that you're really down now from them and things like that. And also you don't have to be friendly always with your team, but sometimes there is a team event, people go out for drinks, go with them, open up a little bit.
Well, that's again, always goes back to that connection, to that relationship. But with the anger, I think you always have to, and he doesn't touch on this in the book, but when you're directing somebody or giving direction, you always have to remember, who are you talking to? What kind of, is this an extrovert? Is it an introvert? Is it a junior member? Is it a senior member? You always have to see, okay, who am I talking to and how can this message be received at that moment? And like I say, he doesn't touch on it in the book, but that's something that would be the next step in leadership, to say, I understand what kind of team members I have.
No, I think he touches this topic in the book, but he says it's like everybody's different and everybody can be a good leader on their own. And when you give also decentralized command, they start becoming leaders on their little task.
Yeah. And I meant the team members.
Yes, but he says multiple times that the team members are very different, and you work with various. You have to have these principles and then act accordingly. Again, to make another example of like something that's completely different than a work or military is parenthood. Like, for example, I remember, again, this is very simple, but decentralized command in my upbringing was that my parents never, for example, gave me a rule, okay, you have to be home for 11 or for 12 or for 1. They would be like, do whatever you like, stay as long as you want, but you're not allowed to take drugs, and the rules were simple. I wasn't allowed to take drugs, and they would explain me why. And they would explain me why from very, very young age. And they would tell me, and the second rule is you always tell us where you are and with who you are. Like, and then this is like a very simple 3 rules. And then he has like, go wherever you want, do whatever you like.
But you already had a very strong trust in place. That's the basis for making that possible. I'm not saying there are families where there's no trust. There is always trust, obviously, within a family. But what you're describing needs a very high level of trust. And I think not every parent-child relationship, depending on where the child is in its development, has that height of the level of trust. It's very individual. You
start with the trust, but every time I misbehaved or I broke one of the rules, I was fucked. Like, they really would fuck me up big time. And then I would learn, because 90% of the time they would be like cool with it, whatever. Like, and then like when they give you a rule and you break that one single rule, so they don't give me micromanagement. They don't give me like, you have to go, you can go
Yeah, they gave you like a frame. They gave you like...
Yeah, but the bigger the frame is, like the frame wasn't something small. It wasn't like you can go to the city center, you can stay until 8:30, and at 9 you have to be here, and we expect you to be like punctual and stuff like that. The rules were very little, so no micromanagement. They didn't tell me with who I'm allowed to go out. They were like 3 rules, and if you break one of the rules, you're fucked, like big time. And that's like, and this is what I'm trying to say, like that a good leader with decentralized command should be like really give you a task and give you assignment, maybe a deadline, and then you come up with a plan, and the leader should intervene with really minimal amount of
yes, I agree,
energy.
Yeah. You have to find your way through the task. That's how you develop critical thinking then as well. So yes.
Another thing that when they give you this decentralized command, you take ownership of what they gave you, because the least leader intervenes in what you're doing, the more you feel it like your own. So nobody wants to do a work that sucks, or nobody wants to. Yeah, like when you're in charge of something, you feel it more like yourself, and you're more putting extra work into it.
Yeah, I feel that you put more of your, this is going to sound weird, brain power into it too. I'm actually shocked. In the last few years, I've seen and been part of a lot of teams where there is a very, I'm going to say slightly ego-driven leader maybe. And I've seen teams where there is no or very little decentralized command, and where really then even mid to senior members of those teams have, I don't know if it's that they have trouble taking decisions then without the overall leader, or if it's that they think they shouldn't, but it feels then very stalled also. And it stalls creativity too, if we think about the creative process, if we go back to the creative industry, because it creates like a corset to decision making. And I've seen this a lot in the last few years, and I think it's very strange how that's coming up. Maybe it's just the environments I've been looking into professionally, but I don't know. How do you feel? Have you seen that?
No,
too?
Definitely. I have had like a micromanager boss, which like tells you like every single thing you do should go through him, and then every single decision you make should be decided through him, and then at some point you're like, fuck this shit, I'm not gonna even think about it, or not even give ideas, because no matter what idea I give, it sucks, because he has the better ideas. And in the meanwhile, I've had bosses which are like, this is your task, and I'm like, how do you want me to do it? And they go like, I don't know, I've never done it either, do whatever you feel like. And then you're like, okay, where do I start? And then it's like your own little project treasure that you want to carry on, and then it's like your child. Like in the end, it's like you get to take the decisions. Like you say,
you're committed, and you're invested then.
And you said something about trust, and the reality is that you build trust. Like.
Yes, you build it and you earn it, especially.
And you build it through this decentralized command. And of course, when you're a new member of a team, they give you a little task. They don't give you the most critical task for the company. They give you like some task that you have to execute. You execute this task. You execute it well. So they're like, okay, now there is a little bit of trust. Let's give him or her bigger task, and you execute that task well, and then so build trust. Like back to parenthood, like I was first allowed to go in the neighborhood and with certain friends, then
but you were given the possibility and the responsibility, and you earned the trust. I think it's very difficult to say, and we're back to that communication. You build trust, and you have to earn trust, but not only as a team member, also as a leader. You have to earn the trust of the people who you are leading, who you are responsible for the direction.
Yes, but you earn this trust by being fair, by being all the principles we said so far.
Yeah, by showing up.
By showing up,
Yes.
I think it's something that but also through your subordinates, you build trust by delegating them a task. They execute it well, and then you give them a little bit a bigger task, and then goes on and on and on. And this is again something that it's all complementary, because if you have a bigger ego, at some point you'll be like, this guy's getting too good, he might take my position, and then you give away from these people a certain task because you're maybe afraid for your status and stuff like that.
Yes.
And if you're a good leader, you don't care about this stuff. You care only about the big. You keep what they say, keep the eye on the ball, and the ball is your project. It's the revenue of your company. It's whatever it's like the finances of your family. You have to you have to do the best to obtain the better final result.
Yeah, it's about the big picture. Yeah.
And another important aspect of teamwork, like another of the 4 main law of combat, is cover and move, which everybody have heard maybe from movies, when like when you shoot and your teammates can move forward, like in the in a firefight, and then they shoot and then you move forward. And this is a metaphor, of course, in the business world, but it means like that you have to cover your teammates, which means like take care of them when they're in difficulties, and then they take care of you when you're in a difficulty. And this is something that for me it's really important to cultivate within teams, because sometimes it's like when principle is not being followed, like I don't know, it happens a lot of time in the office when they say, oh, like this guy always goes at 5 and this guy always comes at 7, and they start looking into each other, and this guy has so much holidays and this guy has so much this and that. Yeah,
or even if it's in a project, if it's just like, oh no, I have enough on my plate, I'm not, ask somebody else to do that, or I can't help you here because whatever here, and you're left alone. And
yeah, like I think that it's very important that you help each other, and before you leave the office, always you ask, I don't know, your teammate, are you staying still very long? You have a lot on your plate. Should I stay? We divide a little bit the task and we go both a little later, but nobody stays until crazy late. And I don't know.
But again, be selective with who you're talking to when you say that. I think that's the balance again.
Well, the principle is to cover and move. And then, of course, you get feedback from the person, you take ownership, you have the dichotomy of leadership.
Yes.
So no rule, it's like black and white. But the principle is that you have to start cultivating from the top as a leader, and then through the team. And even if a team member, it doesn't mean that you... Sometimes if you have a bad leader and you're subordinate and you create this through your behavior, you can make a cohesive relationship with your teammates. And when the majority of the team are connected and a team, they can overcome the leadership. So you can always be a leader. You don't have to wait from your leader to be like the one that guides you from above. And, you can be, if you see you have a sucky leader, you start taking you have sort of a void of power. If your leader, it's not doing what he's supposed to do, and you start doing it and the team start trusting you, you don't need a stamp like your leader.
Yes,
you will be leader anyways.
I think that's where we were discussing it before, leadership versus management. And in leadership in the end is, like you say, it's not a title. It's a mindset. It's a way of working with others. It's a way of viewing relationships and taking responsibility, taking ownership. It's all these things. It's not just reserved for, I don't know, C-level or executives or managers or anything. Anybody can lead, and lead in a way that's well. And I mean, in the end, in business, if you're within your team, if you're a leader without having that stamp, leader of XYZ, that will be recognized as well then, and that will benefit your career then as well.
Yes. And of course, as we said before, it's nothing. Leadership is not being the boss. It's not being like the title, owner, boss, CEO, and then now I'm the CEO. Now I tell you what to do, and you just do it because you do. It doesn't even happen in the military where they have like martial law where you can go in front of a judge, like. Because if you see that the decision of your leader is stupid and you're gonna die, you're not gonna do it. And this is what also Jocko says. So it's the same in any situation. Like if you see, I've been in such an environment and you're like, fuck this shit, this is total stupid. And if you're just a manager and you're not a leader, it gets even worse because your subordinates see that you don't care. You consider them, it's sort of considering your subordinates like numbers. Like just parts of a mechanism, not human beings. Like you think, okay, I can take this off and put another one and they will work. But it's like, this is not efficient. And if you have good people in your team, they will be the first one to notice this shit and to leave your company because they will be like, they will take ownership. They will work a little bit. They will push through. They will try their best. But if the situation keeps staying very bad, they will be like, okay, I'm out of here because this is not like... It's a lost battle.
Yeah, and I mean, there are situations where you're going to say, okay, this doesn't make sense for me, and I tried, and it's not working. And if we're talking about the creative industry, I'm not growing as well, or I'm not inspired, or whatever. Then those are situations where you have to say, I'm going to have to leave that leader because it's not working for me. But I feel leadership is really... I think it's really about creating those safe spaces and to provide a direction for the entire team, to have that big picture, to see the entire scheme in front of you and to help people contribute to that overall goal.
Well, I think that also recently we have experienced extremely bad leadership on a global scale, on a global level, because, for example, if you consider what is going on, again, connected to military in Afghanistan now, this total mess that was created by the US and and the allied of the US, which are Germany too, Italy too. Everything started with, of course, America deciding to retire from Afghanistan with Trump, and then Trump was he wasn't a good leader, and he was a very bad leader. And also the way he transitioned to Biden was very, against what leadership is, because the goal is to bring forward your nation, and you need to put aside your ego and collaborate with the next president. And then when Biden the last few days went out and spoke about the situation, he was like, this is not our response. This is not our responsibility. We're not gonna die. We gave them everything. They didn't execute it. That was never the mission. We accomplished our mission. And then you're like, no, this is like, I feel super. This is not like, I think that the general mood from what I see on social media and people is that they're like, what the hell is he talking about? Like,
well, I believe, and this hits on one important aspect as well. It's not only your job to police or to protect, if we're talking about this, but it's also your job as a leader, and let's keep the U.S. example, to help the economy or the nation or the country grow again, to help rebuild. If you're going to be that present in their everyday lives for so many years, you have to help them rebuild. Now, I'm not an expert on the subject. I don't know in what way they've done that, but I do know that in the United States history, it's not been the strong point of the U.S. to help countries, economies, governments, and cultures rebuild from such war trauma. So I think there the leadership aspect probably came a little short, and that's the whole thing with helping your team, helping your responsibility field, helping them grow and do things on their own. And
yeah, and like like, for example, the problem is that also Jocko has talked about that way before it happened. This whole situation with Afghanistan is that when you go for a war, you need to win the war, and you have to be prepared to stay as long as it takes to obtain the final result which you decide. And if they say the final result was to beat terrorists and to make the world safer, I don't think the way they're doing it right now, it's really something that you can consider safer. And what this happened is probably because of another of the rules of combat, which is to keep things simple and clear. And
that's almost my favorite one nowadays, to be honest, because everything's so complicated, and then people overcomplexify things on top of that.
Yes, because if you think about it, it's like, what is the mission? Which countries we're going to conquer? Are we doing nation building? Are we doing war at terrorists? What are we doing? And then it gets unclear.
Why are we even getting involved? Maybe that question too.
And once you get involved, it's not so simple, because you can see now how local population will be affected by it, because this started 20 years ago, and there are a lot of 20 years old Afghani people that never lived under the law of Sharia. So it will be a mess. It's sort of a mess, and the way that it was exposed by I mean, you can be a Democrat or whatever, you can be a liberal or a conservative, but no matter who you are, it's clear that what they said was, I don't know, was very disappointing, and it feels like the goal of the war was just to have a war instead of any other goal. And this is fundamental in when you are leading and when you have a mission with your team, that to keep everything simple, to decide what is the goal, to explain it in a clearest way that everybody understand, and so that there is no misunderstanding, so that there won't be a situation, no, but I said this, but you meant that. No, you have to have really, really clear language, so that nobody can say afterwards, maybe you meant that and I understood this.
Well, those are really 2 points. Simplification and clear language are two things in my mind, which are both important. When we talk about simplify, I believe it's harnessing and focusing the resources and the creative power, if we're talking about the creative context, because we're all getting rid of the whole multitasking myth slowly, thankfully, because that's just, I don't know when that came up in the 2000s or something, that everybody's supposed to multitask. But I think that's what simplify really is to focus your energy to so you can give 100% on one thing, or even 2 times 50%, and not 10 tasks with 10%, which just doesn't make sense. And the other thing that you said that was just very important, which you said at the beginning as well, communication. It is so important to understand what words you are using. And I see this every day as well, that people don't think about what words they're using, and they don't understand that somebody may see or understand this word in that context in a different way. You have to be really mindful about how you're communicating, what language you're using, how you're bringing your concept across, because there's a huge difference between one word and the other, and how you're bringing across that word. I mean, that's when we have definitions of words in the end too. There's a difference, for example, between clarity and simplification, or there's a difference between complicated and complex. You really have to know what that difference is, because only then will you give your team also a chance to really understand what you want and what you're helping them to understand.
Well, it was what I was saying in the beginning, and what Jocko did when he was studying. He decided to study English because understanding how to communicate with your people,
that is so important. That is so important. I can really fully underline that with exclamation points
and once
and emojis.
Okay, now we're going in the wrong direction.
And flash.
Okay, now all the leadership and trustworthy feeling that we had toward you went down. But as Jocko would say, back to the book, back to what he says. After you have done all of this, after you have kept your communication simple, from I guess the experience of everyone, when you set a goal, the whole achieving that goal, the process to achieve that goal is never linear. It's always like up and downs, and sometimes there are too many problems coming together, and there is mayhem. And what he says is, in this situation, is fundamental that the leader and the team members can prioritize and execute, which means, as I said before, like there are moments where you fuck up something at work or you did something wrong, and then you have this feeling that everything is falling apart. And then this is the moment where you need to stay detached. So shut off emotions, look around, assess the situation, and start saying, okay, we have this and this and this problem. The biggest problem is this one. We start with it.
And that's so hard for so many. I mean, probably everybody has seen it at least once in their career or studies with clients or with others. Ask somebody to prioritize 3 things out of 10, and I don't know, my clients usually say, yes, but it's all a priority. It's like, yes, but what's priority 1? These 3 things. It's like, no, you can only start with 1. What is it? And that's where the real problem comes. It's like, oh, I don't know. And I think that's so important as well, the whole prioritization.
Yes.
And you have to learn that. It sounds stupid, but you really have to learn how to prioritize.
And you have to learn it not only for your work, not only for your goals, but for your life.
Yes.
Because it's the same in life. Like you have a limited amount of resources and you have to think, okay, is this really worth it? Should I put my effort and my money on it? Shouldn't I? And the same is at work. And if you study, if you're creative also. And also like, I don't know, if you have a bigger, sometimes people tend to be like taking too much things on board. And then sometimes you should be like, okay, I have already a goal. I'm not taking this other project either because I have to really prioritize this other aspect in my life. So
yeah, what aspect or what things are essential to reaching those 1 or 2 goals that you have, and not 15 goals, but
yes,
what is essential to making that happen?
Because once you spread into too many things, if you multitask too much, then the pushing power towards the different goals is not enough to make any of those excellent. So this is a big problem.
I feel we've all been there at least once in our lives, probably very much more than once.
So I'm gonna sum up what we have said. So to be a good leader, to have good leadership abilities, you have to stay detached, to put your ego in check, to take extreme ownership, but keep in mind the dichotomy of leadership, and follow the 4 rules of combat, which are cover, move, keep it simple, prioritize and execute, and decentralized command. These are the main lessons we can take away from Jocko Willink. And again, we suggest you to go and check out his books. There are even adults that read his kids' book, so you can start wherever you want. He has also some personal self-development books, which are discipline equals freedom, which is another mantra of Jocko Willink, which means if you stay disciplined, you have more freedom in your life because you have done already your duties. I think this is available for free on Spotify. I'll figure out the link for you guys.
And we'll put the links on the website as well in the coming days. So we'll create sort of
yes. The specialty of this podcast is that the podcast, it's the audio form, but you guys, now that you have listened to the podcast, and this is why I don't like audiobooks so much, is that you cannot take notes. You don't have the physical copy of the book. And what we are doing now is that when we do this special podcast where we break down a topic of your daily creative life, we'll be putting articles on thecreativeinsider.com. So also as a companion to this podcast, or they're complementary. Like the podcast is the companion of the article and the article is companion of the podcast. I have written my first article for the Creative Insider magazine, so make sure to go on the creativeinsider.com and read it. Another book that you can read from Jocko Willink is he has written a book also with Dave Burke. Everything is in the article. It's the code, the evaluations, and the protocols, which is a very short book that you can read in an hour, and it's a very big boost of your personal development as a leader and as a human being. And I want to say a disclaimer that in the future we'll be using affiliate links most probably. So a way for you to support us will be just to buying this object through our links so that you can support the show and to have to help us make a better production and a better product.
And if you'd like to support us in the meantime, feel free to take a look at our Patreon page. We're very happy about your support there. And
on the Patreon page, you can spend $5 a month. And what we're going to offer you so far is to have the names in advance of our future guests. And you'll be able to submit questions. And some of the questions will be chosen and will be directly asked to our guests.
I'm very excited on what kind of questions will be coming then.
Yeah, so please do support the podcast so that we can expand and improve, and we're moving into video. We're working on it. It's not so simple. And of course, you can support us for free by also on the creativeinsider.com to stay in touch. Just join the newsletter, and every month Désirée will send you the Creative Insider update about what happened in the last month. And of course, you can follow our social media channels, which are at TCI Podcast on Instagram, the Creative Insider page on LinkedIn. We are also on Pinterest and on TikTok, but we're not so active yet there. We're expanding
because we're prioritizing before executing.
And because sometimes we're in holidays too, but we always deliver a new podcast. So yeah, this is it. Thank you for listening to the podcast. You were awesome.
Thank you. Yes.
And enjoy the articles on the creativeinsider.com, and have a good week, everybody. Bye-bye, Désirée.
Bye, everybody.
The whole world stops just like that. Just like that.